I was convinced in my mind that I had an alcohol problem, but I thought it to be rather humorous.
And then I would use on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then it would kind of spill it over into Monday.
By the time you realize that it's not healthy for you, you've already led a life of just destruction in not only your life, but in others.
I was getting high and getting drunk every day. That's basically all I did. That's all I cared about. I didn't care about myself. I didn't care about my family or my future.
I'm in prison for murder, first-degree murder, and I've been in prison for 44 years.
For those of us who are incarcerated, once we leave, there aren't too many opportunities.
New York City is now experiencing the worst homelessness crisis since the Great Depression of the 1930s.
On any given night in the U.S., 250,000 to 400,000 people can be without shelter.
There are over 500,000 foster kids in America. There's probably a higher number. The stats are often 2 or 3 years behind.
I didn't know that the kids would age out of the system at 18 and they were just completely on their own.
I always felt that I never belonged, that I was different, that I was inadequate, and that I was misunderstood.
Isabel's anorexia began when she was 13.
People just think you just stop eating, but that is not what anorexia is. You don't just decide from one day to the next to stop eating. It's very hard. It's real suffering and it goes deep.
I always associate happiness with being skinny.
If you just stop and take a minute, you can look and you can see that there's a lot of people out there suffering.
We are in the midst of a battle.
We are in the midst of a battle. We are in the midst of a battle.
One that is being waged all around us.
What once had order and beauty
has been churned up,
charred,
and tangled.
Broken pieces pieced back together, a mangled picture of what once had been.
A mangled picture of what once had been.
This battle has been waging since near the very beginning.
No, it wasn't always this way, but it has been for a very long time.
And now the landscape of our world,
the panoramas of our own lives,
hardly resemble
what was made for us at the beginning.
For so long, generation after generation, this war has dragged on relentlessly with no signs that victory was near.
But then, something happened
that shook the very
foundation.
The very foundations of this ravaged world.
Something happened that promised victory in places of destruction.
And now, centuries later, we can feel its effects.
We can hear its continued rumbling.
And so we put our ears to the ground. To decipher where this rumbling is coming from. It's the rumble of a rebellion.
The rumble of a rebellion that began with the cry of a baby.
Because 2,000 years ago, heaven crashed in.
Shattering expectations, he came in the form of a man who is God himself, and he fought the foes no man could defeat.
In the midst of the murmuring crowds, he defied hunger by feeding 5,000 men with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish.
Looking into the pleading eyes of a paralyzed man, so desperate to walk that he would tear through a ceiling, the rebel struck down sickness and commanded him to walk.
Standing in the public square, surrounded by corrupted rulers and rule makers, he declared war on oppression.
But his greatest battle
and strongest foes still lay ahead.
For he had not come only to defeat hunger, sickness, and oppression. He came to destroy sin and its companion, death. But great victory demands great cost. And thus began the road to the cross.
He was betrayed by his own
and allowed himself to be captured.
He was silent while liars shouted accusations.
He was mocked and tortured.
And he was nailed to a cross.
He was mocked and tortured. He was nailed to a cross.
The God who became flesh saw his flesh pierced. The one who knew no sin felt its full wrath. The author of life died.
Died.
The author of life died.
The one who had been wrapped in cloths and laid in a manger had been wrapped in cloths and laid in a tomb. And the rebellion reeled.
With his death, his followers found themselves stunned. If the one who had given them hope was dead, their hope too was surely dead.
But the roar of this rebellion was not yet done. It began again with the crash of a rock falling away from the mouth of a tomb.
Every war has a decisive moment. That moment that in hindsight one can point to and identify where the war was truly won, even though the battle may wage on.
This was that moment.
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 Jesus had risen from the dead.